Hello everyone, this is Glenda and welcome back to Creative Grandma. Today's crochet tutorial is going to be for Stitch of the Week number 56, the Tunisian Picot stitch. Now this is more of a stitch technique than an actual stitch pattern. So this was a special request from one of my subscribers who want to make something special for someone they know, and they just needed a little bit of help with how to change colors with this stitch. So for this crochet tutorial today, I'm not going to make this. This is just an example of what this technique will form on your work. So this again is the Tunisian Picot stitch, and this stitch is worked in between the two vertical bars when you do the Tunisian stitch. So what you're doing is you're working your stitch across the row in the regular way, and when you're coming back for your return pass on your row, then you're creating your little picot stitches to form this raised puff pattern. Now this stitch pattern can make all kinds of elaborate designs. You follow a chart and you can create your name on an afghan, you can create hearts, diamonds, and here's a photo the subscriber sent me to show you a more elaborate way of using these stitches. You can see how it just brings so much elegance to a design. So this is Chill Chasers Afghans to Knit and Crochet. I'm not sure what book she got this out of. It's something you may be able to search online if you wanted to look for that pattern. So that's again a more elaborate way of using this stitch. So for today, I'm not doing this sample. This was just to show you what it looks like using that picot stitch, how it looks changing colors where it really makes those stitches pop out. So I'm going to show you a simple example today. We're going to work a row across. I'm going to show you how to do it in one solid color, and then I'm going to do it again and show you how to change colors if you want to really add accent and contrast to your design. So let's get started. You're going to need two different colors today, and you're going to need an afghan hook. Now I'm using a size 10J hook. Now I'm using a 14-inch hook. You can use a 10-inch hook if you have one, so you can use the shorter hook because we're only making a small sample. So grab two different colors of yarn, grab your hook. Again, I'm using a 4 worsted weight yarn, and I'm using a size 10J afghan hook. So I'll be right back and we'll get started. I have my yarn tied around my hook, and we're just going to chain 10. Yarn over, pull through, and continue until you have 10 chains on your hook. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Now when you're doing the regular afghan stitch, there's two different ways that you can start your first row. Now you can choose to turn your work, and you can go into those back bumps where you just insert into that back bump, yarn over, and pull through, which creates a nice bottom edge. Now for this video, I'm just going to go into the top of the chain. So it's your preference. If you know how to do the afghan stitch, you can either go in the back bumps or you can go into the top loops. So again, for this video, I'm just going into the top loop. We're going to skip that first chain. You're going to insert into the top of the next chain. You're going to yarn over and pull through. You're going to insert into the next chain, yarn over and pull through, and you're going to continue working a regular Tunisian simple stitch in each chain across. So we're just inserting in the chain, yarn over and pull through, and we're keeping all the loops on our hook. Now when you chain the afghan stitch, if you chain 10, then you're going to have 10 loops on your hook. If you chain 100, then you should have 100 loops on your hook. So when you look at your work, you have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 loops. So when you do this technique, your first row is always just the regular afghan stitch. So now we're going to take our loops off the hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and you're going to continue yarn over, pull through 2 across your work. When you get to the end of the row, you'll have 2 loops, and you're going to yarn over and pull through both of those loops, and you'll end with 1 loop on your hook, which counts as the first loop of the next row. So now we're going to begin, and we're going to work the Tunisian Picot stitch in one solid color using the yarn we have on our hook. You're going to skip that first stitch here of the row because this first loop counts as the first stitch. You're going to insert underneath the next vertical stitch. You're going to yarn over and pull through. You're keeping all your loops on the hook. Insert into the next vertical bar, yarn over and pull through. And you're going to continue working the Tunisian simple stitch across the first part or the forward pass of your row. So we're just going to continue over to the end of the row. When I get to the end of the row, I'm just going under the top loop only and working that last stitch. When you look at your work, you should have 10 loops on your hook. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So now we're going to do our Tunisian Picot stitch when we work our return pass across row 2. So we're going to yarn over and we're going through 1 loop only. You're going to yarn over and go through 2 loops. Now I'm going to work a picot stitch. So you're going to chain 4, yarn over, pull through, that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to bend that chain 4 down, and you're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops again. You're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops again. Now this is all determined by what design you want to make. Now I'm just showing you the technique. If you're following a chart, then you will continue working the yarn over, pull through 2 until you get to the next space where you want to make that picot stitch. So I'm just going to make another picot stitch now. So you just take your loops off, yarn over going through 2, and when you come to that next space where you want to make that stitch, you're just going to chain 4. You're going to yarn over, pull through, that's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's all there is to making that picot stitch. You're just bending that chain 4 down towards the bottom of the work in front of your work, and then you're just going to start again taking your loops off the hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Now I'm making a picot stitch every 3 stitches, so I'm going to go ahead and make another one now. So now I'm over to the place where I want to make my next stitch, so I'm just going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. You're going to bend that chain 4 down towards the bottom front of your work. And then you're just going to start up again, taking the loops off your hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. So now I'm going to make another picot stitch here. So again, all you're going to do is chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you're going to continue taking your loops off in the same manner. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2. I'm over to my last 2 loops. You're going to yarn over and pull through 2. So your stitch is only half worked and you're at the end of row 2. You can see how they're all bunched up and it's all curly. And now we're going to form those picot stitches when you work the first half of the next row. So let's begin. Your first loop counts as your first stitch of that row. So you skip this edge stitch. You're going to insert into that next vertical stitch. You're going to yarn over, pull through that stitch, and you're keeping your loops on the hook. So this may confuse you, but what you're going to do is you're just going to take that chain 4, pull it down in front of your work, and then you're going to jump to the left side of that stitch, and you're going to look for that next vertical stitch. So if you look at your work, you can see here's your vertical stitches, and we're going into the next stitch. So just bend that chain 4 to the front bottom of your work. You're going to insert into that next vertical bar. I'm sorry, I have white on white, so hopefully you can see this. Insert under that next vertical stitch, and you're just going to pull your yarn tighter. Just get that all put together, yarn over, and pull through that stitch. So when you look at your work, you can see how it puffs that stitch out. It just makes that chain 4 puff loop, and that's what forms that picot stitch. So now you're going to look for your next vertical stitch. So here they are. You're going to insert underneath that next vertical stitch, yarn over, and pull through. Now you're over to your next chain 4 space, so you're just going to use your finger, bend that chain 4 space down, and you're going to look on the left side of that chain 4 for your next vertical stitch. So insert underneath the next vertical stitch, and if you don't know where it is, just look below. You can see here's your vertical stitch, and when you follow it up, there's the one you go in, the top vertical stitch. Yarn over and pull through. And then again, you can see how it's forming that next picot stitch. You're going to look for your next vertical stitch. Here it is. Insert underneath that vertical stitch, yarn over, and pull through. Now again, when you're working this stitch, I'm just doing a simple row of 1 picot stitch every 3 stitches. Now when you're following a chart, again, you have to remember that these stitches are worked in between those vertical bars. So now we're over to our next picot stitch. You're going to look for your next vertical stitch. It's right here on the left side. So all you do is follow that chain 4 right up the arch and down to the other side, and you'll find that vertical stitch. So just look for it. Here's the bottom vertical stitch. Here's the top vertical stitch. Push that chain 4 forward. Insert into the vertical stitch on the left side of that chain 4. Yarn over and pull through, and make sure that you're pulling your yarn tight so you can really secure that in there. You don't want it too loose and have this having a gap. Find your next vertical stitch, insert underneath the next vertical stitch, yarn over, and pull through. We have 1 more picot stitch to finish. So you're going to look for your next vertical stitch right on the left side of that chain 4. Take your fingers, push that chain 4 forward. Find your next vertical stitch and make sure that your picot stitch is to the front of your work. Don't let it go behind your hook. It needs to stay in front of your work. Yarn over and pull through that vertical stitch. You're going to insert underneath the top of that last loop, that last vertical stitch, yarn over, and pull through. So when you look at your work, you can see how you made your picot stitches, how they puff right up. And then when you count your stitches, you should have a total of 10 loops on your hook. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So now if you're following a chart, you're going to chain 4 wherever you want your next picot stitch to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my picot stitches right on top of the ones that I already made. So I'm going to do 1 more row of the solid color, and then I'm going to show you how to change colors and put that extra color in there. So Again, to make the solid color picot stitches, you're forming the picot stitches when you're doing the return pass of each row. So that's where you determine where you want your next picot stitch, is when you're doing that return row. So we're going to yarn over and pull through one loop only, and that starts our return pass. You're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Now you can choose to make your picot stitches wherever you want. I'm just showing you the technique, but this is just a good way to follow along with me. I'm going to make my next picot stitch now, and I'm making it right over top of the one below. All you're going to do is chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, sometimes this gets really loose, so you just want to make sure you tighten up your hook. You chain 4, you made your first half of your picot stitch. Now you're going to continue working across the row, taking the loops off. You're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. You're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Now I'm going to make another picot stitch right over top the one I made below. So all I'm going to do is chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then you're going to continue taking your loops off your hook until you get to the next space where you want to make a picot stitch. I'm going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops. So now I'm over to where my last picot stitch was made in the row below, and I'm just going to make one over top of it. So all I'm going to do is chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you're going to continue taking your loops off your hook until you get to where you want to make your next picot stitch. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, and pull through 2 loops. I have 1 picot stitch remaining, so I'm just going to work another one right over top of that. So again, all I'm going to do is chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then I'm going to continue taking the rest of the loops off my hook. Yarn over, pull through 2. I'm at the last 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2. This last loop on my hook counts as the first stitch of the next row. So now we're going to take our chain 4 and we're going to secure them into making the picot stitch. So again, you're going to start your row by skipping that edge stitch, which is the first stitch. That first loop counts as the first stitch. You're going to insert your hook into that next vertical stitch, yarn over, and pull through. So when you get to the chain 4 space, no matter what design you're working, you'll know because you have this open space, and then you're just going to secure that chain 4 and make it into a picot stitch. You're going to take your fingers and push that forward, and you're going to find your next vertical stitch, which is right to the left side, left bottom of that chain 4. So just follow that chain 4 down, insert into that next vertical stitch, and again, you have to make sure this is underneath and to the front of your work. Push that down forward in front of your hook, then tighten up, yarn over, and pull through that vertical stitch. And there you can see you made your picot stitch. Insert into the next vertical stitch, yarn over, and pull through. You continue working across until you find your next picot stitch. Now, I only have 2 vertical stitches in between mine, so again, depending on what pattern you're using, you may have a lot more stitches in between. So now you can see you're back over to your next picot stitch because there's a chain 4 space. So you're just going to push that chain 4 forward, follow it down and over to the left side bottom of that chain 4 and insert into that next vertical stitch. Make sure that chain 4 is to the front of your work underneath your hook. Yarn over and pull through. Insert into the next vertical stitch, yarn over and pull through. Continue until you get to your next picot stitch. Again, your picot stitch is where you chain 4. We're just going to follow that chain 4 down, and we're going to insert into that vertical stitch. Now this is turning a little bit and curving, but that's because it's such a small sample and I'm working my stitches so close together. Just make sure you follow it down, find that next vertical stitch, but push that chain 4 forward, then insert into that next vertical stitch at the bottom left of that chain 4. Tighten up, just pull that tight together, yarn over and pull through that vertical stitch. Your picot stitch is made. Insert into the next vertical stitch, yarn over and pull through. And again, if you're following a chart, you will continue working in that manner till you get to your next picot stitch. So we have one more on this row. Again, it's very easy stitch once you get the hang of it. You have your chain 4, you're going to bend it forward, follow it down to the left bottom side, and look for that next vertical stitch. So here you can see our last 2 vertical stitches. You're just going to insert into that vertical stitch at the base of that chain 4. This one I got a little tight. Yarn over and pull through. I'm over to that last stitch, so we're going to insert underneath the top vertical stitch, yarn over and pull through. So you just secured your picot stitches, and you can see how that looks. That's what forms that puff pattern. And then when you look at your hook, you should have a total of 10 stitches. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So now the next row, I'm going to show you how to change colors doing this stitch. We're going to yarn over and pull through 1 loop only. You can see we have 1 more vertical stitch, so I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops. And you would continue that until you get to where you want to make your next picot stitch. So I'm here already, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my red yarn. I'm just going to tie it around my yarn here to get it started, and then I'm going to pull it down so it's even with my work. So when you're working this stitch, when you're pulling through your vertical stitches, you need to pull all the way through that vertical stitch and then do your picot stitch. So we pulled through, I have white on my hook, and now I'm going to chain 4 with the red. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now you need to grab your white. You're only using the color when you chain 4. So I'm going to grab my white, and you want to pull the white until that stitch disappears. And then we're going to yarn over. You're going to pull through the red loop and the white loop. You're pulling through 2 loops. And then what I do is I just pull a little bit on my color, and I tighten up that loose chain right here. So you just want to tighten that up a little bit. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Now I'm over where I want to make my next picot stitch. So again, I already pulled through my vertical stitch. So you're just going to pick up your color. You're going to pull your color through, and then you're going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then take your finger and pull on this white, because you want to pull that until that stitch here disappears. So just pull that down, tighten that up, and then you're going to grab your white and you're going to pull it through the red loop and the white loop. And then just take your red and just don't pull it real tight, just tighten it up just a little bit so it's not real loose. Then you're going to continue yarn over, pull through 2 loops until you get to the next space where you want to make your picot stitch. So here I am again. So I'm going to grab my red, and I'm going to pull it through that white loop, and then I'm going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Again, you're just going to pull on that white strand until that white disappears. Pull that down in there. Then you're going to take your white strand and you're going to pull it through 1 red loop and 1 white loop. You're pulling through 2 loops. Then just take that red, tighten that up a little bit. You don't want this to get too loose. You just want to keep it nice and firm. Yarn over and pull through 2 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops until you get to your next space where you want to make your picot stitch. So I'm here already. So I'm just going to drop the white, grab my color, and I'm going to pull it through the white loop. And then I'm going to chain 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then what you want to do is just pull on that white yarn until this stitch disappears. And then you're going to grab your white yarn and you're going to pull it through 2 loops, the red and the white. We're over to our last 2 stitches. You're going to yarn over and pull through the last 2 stitches. So now you can see that the first half of your picot stitch is made. So now we're going to work the beginning of row 5. So when you make your forward pass across your row, that is where you're taking your chain 4 loops and securing them into the picot stitches. So let's begin. You're going to insert your hook into the next vertical stitch. You're going to yarn over and pull through. You can see you have your next picot chain 4 space here, so you're going to bend that chain 4 forward and you're going to find that next vertical stitch, which is a lot easier to see with that red. So you follow that chain 4 down, insert into the top vertical stitch, that next vertical stitch, making sure that picot stitch is to the front and underneath the hook. Yarn over and pull through. Insert into the top of the next vertical stitch. Now what I am going to do for this row is, if you want to make another row of the red, you need to carry this red back across your work so you can use it for your return pass to make more stitches. So I'm just going to keep it underneath my work and I'm going to take my hook underneath that thread and I'm going to yarn over, bring it underneath the red thread and through that vertical stitch. And what that does is it carries your thread across the back of your work. So now we're over to our next picot stitch. You're going to take that picot stitch, fold it down to the front and towards the bottom of your work, insert into that next vertical stitch. You can see it very easily. It's the one that goes up and down. Insert into that stitch. Make sure that stitch is forward underneath your hook. So make sure that your chain 4 loop is to the front of your work and push it down towards the bottom of the work. Insert your hook into that next vertical stitch. You're going to yarn over and pull through. Your picot stitch is made. You're going to insert into the next vertical stitch. You're going to yarn over and pull through that stitch. So we're over to our next picot stitch, that chain 4 space. You're going to make sure it's facing front. You're going to insert into the next vertical stitch, the top vertical stitch of that current row. And I'm going underneath the red strand of yarn in the back to carry it behind my work. And then I'm going to yarn over, pull underneath that red yarn and pull through my vertical stitch. And again, that helps carry your yarn back across your work. You're going to insert into the next vertical stitch, yarn over and pull through. We're over to our next picot stitch, that chain 4. Take your hook to the left side of that chain 4, insert it into the next vertical stitch. Make sure that picot stitch is to the front, towards the bottom of your work, yarn over and pull through. You're over to your last vertical stitch, so just insert right into the top of that ending vertical stitch, yarn over and pull through. And that is how you secure those stitches. So now we're just going to take our stitches off, and I'm not going to do another row of the colored because I think by now we did enough rows that you get the idea of how you do the picot stitch. So let's take our stitches off. You're going to yarn over, pull through 1 loop on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, continue working yarn over and pull through 2 loops until you get to the end of the row. And that is how you do the Tunisian Picot stitch. And again, just pay attention. It's very easy when you do it with one color. When you're doing it with 2, you have to remember, if you're going more than 3 stitches, you should always attach a second strand of yarn for each stitch section when you go more than 3 stitches. So if I went here and didn't do another picot stitch until over here, then I would use a yarn bob and I would attach another strand of red, and I would work these up the work separately using separate strands of color. It all depends on what design you're doing. So very nice stitch technique if you want to add some of that texture to your work. And again, this is just showing you the technique. This is usually worked from a graph. Let me show you that picture again of how elaborate some of these designs can really get by just using that stitch pattern. So I hope this video has been helpful to at least show you how to do the technique of the Tunisian Picot stitch. Thank you everybody for stopping by today. I hope you enjoyed this technique, and until next time, happy crocheting.